The Son of Man. What does that mean? The human person. What if you were to see that human person going back to where he was before? Where was there a human being in heaven earlier? And the answer is in Daniel. So the key there is it's the Son of Man that you're seeing, not some God the Son, but the Son of Man, the human being. What if you were to see him return, not return as having been there before, I should say go, not return. Some translations have the word return there. That's not in the Greek at all. No Bible verse ever says that Jesus returned to the Father. They do say that he's going to go to the Father. In that case, it's the Son of Man who goes to where he was before. Well, he was there before in a vision in Daniel 7. We're back to a visionary experience of the Son of Man 600 years before Jesus. So what if you were to see him return to that status, not literally return, I hasten to add, but to go to where he was in vision in Daniel 7. The key is the Son of Man, the human being. So that's the thing that you stress there. The human being was there in heaven, in vision, namely in the book of Daniel. The other thing to point out is that Jesus talked about his flesh coming down from heaven. His flesh means him as a human being. Well, you realize then that literally Jesus was not in heaven before he was born as a human being. Trinitarians don't even believe that. So what if Jesus said his body comes down from heaven? That's simply a very Hebrew idiom for describing how he's a gift from heaven. We talk about a heaven-sent gift. He comes down as God's gift like the manna did. The manna, you know, was found on the ground in the morning. It didn't come down as in a parachute from heaven, literally. So all of that is very Jewish and very Hebrew ways of thinking. You start with Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and you say, where does this Jesus come from? From the womb of his mother, Mary. You cannot be older than your own ancestor. You cannot be older than David if you're the son of David. Start there, ground yourself in all of that. Then you deal with John in a more cautious way and be careful not to be misled by mistranslations like in the beginning was the capital word. There's no capital on word there. In the beginning, we should say, was the gospel. The word of God is the gospel as Jesus preached it, God's plan. If you like, in the beginning, God had an idea, and that idea was then embodied in Jesus when Jesus arrived on the scene. Jesus is what that word became, not one-to-one equal with a pre-existing person. So that's how you'd approach that whole topic.
What if Jesus tends to exaggerate at times?
Yeah.
For example, he says, if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out.
Yes.
Your hand, chop it off. Things like that.
Yes.
What if here, in the context of what you were saying, so he's given a very hard teaching here. This is the famous John 6, where, like you said, he's talking about himself as coming down from heaven, eating his flesh, drinking his blood.
Yeah. Right.
You can understand it's amazing because they even call him a cannibal, you know.
Yes.
The Pharisees. So if you follow the context, he says, does this offend you? In verse 61. In other words, so what I'm telling you in a spiritual, obvious way, is this offending you? Then what if you were to see?
Yes, I think so. We'd call that hyperbole. It's an exaggeration. You remember that James twice says that every good gift comes down from heaven. Tells us then what that coming down from heaven means. Jesus is the ultimate gift from heaven, not meaning that he comes down as in a parachute, literally from the sky. That would contradict Matthew, Mark, and Luke and everything else in the Bible. And you're right that when Jesus talked about his body and blood and so on, they were offended by that. And so he said to them, are you going to leave me? A lot of people left him. They ceased to be his disciples anymore because that was just too much for them. So Jesus looked at his little inner group and said, well, are you going to leave as well? And you remember what Peter answered. Where in the world are we going to go? There's no alternative. And then they said, we know that you're the one who has the words of life. So they stuck with him. But there was the potential there for being offended by words which were too spiritual, too deep, too Hebraic, if you like. And that's where people stumble today.
Actually, that's exactly what the text says.
Yes.
Look at verse 63. The words that I have spoken to you are spirit. In other words, he's saying, it's not a literal thing I'm saying here. It's a spiritual teaching here I'm giving you about my body coming down from heaven, eating my flesh, and so on. So obviously, this is not to be read in a literal way, because then you'll get in real trouble.
That's right. Some of them couldn't handle it. They left, and the disciples would have left. So that is a difficult passage.